Congrats, for sure. All right, we want to bring in the mayor, former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, who's making headlines once again this morning. Mr. Mayor, good to see you.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing well. So we learned over the past few days that you had taken your name out of the running for Secretary of State, but that happened weeks ago. We didn't know about
November 28th, I think. November 28th. Yeah, I decided that, first of all, I'm very happy in what I do. A lot of people say that. They don't mean it. I do.
What do you do?
Well, I run a security company all over the world, as you know. That was one of the issues because I did a lot of work for 10 different governments, still do. And I also run a part of a law firm that does cybersecurity, which is a passion of mine, and I run a cybersecurity practice. So when someone said to me, you're going to travel a lot as Secretary of State, I showed them my travel schedule, and I said, no, probably less. He had good choices. My objective in joining the campaign was never to get a job. It was the last thing in my mind. It was for my country. I didn't want to see this country slip into socialism. I didn't want to see us become some kind of European second-rate country. I thought that's where we were headed, and I thought only Donald Trump could stop us. Also, I knew him for 28 years. He's a close personal friend. And I knew what America is now finding out, what a great president he could become.
Yeah.
So I did it with a great deal of passion. And the idea of Secretary of State sort of entered my mind toward the end. And when I thought about it and I saw the choices that he had and the difficult position he was in because of his loyalty to me and friendship, I said, best thing for me to take myself out of it. And there was no other job.
Was that a difficult thing to do?
A little bit, but not that difficult because I knew he had good choices. If I thought he didn't have a great choice and, God, he needed only me, which is probably never true, that they ever need only you. But if I thought that, I would do it in a minute.
Let's talk about some of those choices.
Well, because there are a lot of names in the mix, including Rex Tillerson, who is...
Well, I think Rex Tillerson is an excellent choice. I think Josh Bolton. Had I been president in 2008, I probably would have appointed him as Secretary of State. So, I mean, Josh Bolton, I think, is superior. I think Mitt Romney, I mean, I voted for him. I supported him. I thought he'd been a much better president than Barack Obama. But I do think, like Mike Huckabee does, he should apologize. Or at least he should explain what he meant by some of the comments which hurt me greatly when I was campaigning for my friend Donald Trump. I think actually Donald is less troubled by it than all of those
other people are angry.
It's like sometimes your wife gets angrier when someone insults you than you do.
Well, that's true,
and
though.
You get over it.
I mean, President Bush said that once. He said, I've been the son of a president. I've been the president myself, and I can tell you it's much harder to be the son of a president because you take it so personally. You mentioned being hurt by this.
I was hurt by what Mitt did. I supported Mitt. Maybe not as much as I did Donald, but I surrogated for him 50 times. I introduced him to people. I helped to raise money for him. I was deeply involved in his campaign. And then all of a sudden he was saying, he wasn't just like sitting out on the sidelines like Jeb Bush and a few others who I didn't like either. I thought they should have been in it. But at least they weren't putting out some really terrible things that he said about him.
Yeah. Were you worried at all about you mentioned off the top here that could have been a concern working with 10 governments like you have and your cybersecurity role? Would that have been a problem?
No, actually what I did was before I dropped out, I had myself completely vetted. I said, vet me for the job. I don't know, just in case you want to use me for a mission 5 years from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. So I was completely vetted. I passed 100%. Not a single... The mistake the media made was they thought I represented these governments in Washington. I didn't. I did work for them. For example, the other night I got an award from the Brazilian government for reducing crime in Medellin by 48%. They had a dinner at the Brazilian embassy in Washington for 120 people. That's the kind of work I do. I do crime reduction, terrorist reduction. That's the kind of work I do.
So why did you wait 2 weeks then to come out? Because as reported, you were behind closed doors making this decision, what, 10, 12 days ago?
Because I didn't want to put the campaign requested that we withhold it. Plus, they didn't accept it immediately. They said they wanted to keep me in the running. And I said, well, I don't want to be, but they said they wanted to keep me in the running. So we agreed that I'll wait until you're ready. When you're ready, then we can announce it.
You business interests or connections have were purported or reported that might be a complication for you. You say they were not.
They were not, and not only that, I checked with several key members of the Senate, Republican and Democrat, and I think I would.
But on that, Rex Tillerson, ExxonMobil CEO, his name has risen to the top. He's an international businessman. Do you think that helps him?
Well, Well, you know, I think so. Look, what are we going to do? Appoint people that don't know the world? Okay, we'll find a guy who's, what do you call it, agoraphobia, when you stay home all the time?
Yeah.
We'll find a guy who stays home all the time. He's never been anywhere. He can't figure out where China is on the map. We'll make him Secretary of State.
Would you?
This is absurd. Who are you going to appoint to a job like Secretary of State except somebody who knows the world? That qualification I have.
You mentioned you wanted General Petraeus' name is in the mix. Also, you mentioned you watched the segment earlier about generals.
I should not have left him out. I would General Petraeus I trust with anything, and I wouldn't care if they said I had 10 generals in the cabinet. Also, this thing about generals gets me really angry. When it becomes a liability that you are a general officer of the United States Army in this country, then there's something wrong with the left wing of this country. I think Obama appointed 3 generals. I don't know what's the difference between 3 and 5, not much. Generals have very differing opinions, if you've ever dealt with them, and I have. When they get out, they get very differing opinions. Most of them are probably a little bit more right, but I know some that are way off on the left.
Let's talk about some of the people that have been controversial.
Oh, and by the way, Donald Trump has appointed more women than Barack Obama.
We were talking about that earlier on the show.
How come that's not the head? Why is that not the head?
We talked about it this morning on the show. 5,
Could be
and
up to
media.
5.
In fact, the New York Times just 3 days ago saying is Donald Trump's cabinet misogynistic. And harsh. I want to ask you, though,
because we have too many women.
I guess. I want to ask you, though, about Gary Cohn.
With women.
Can I ask you about Gary Cohn?
Sure.
You know, he's 56 years old. He's to head the White House National Economic Council. And this comes, of course, despite the president-elect's slamming of Wall Street during the campaign. He, of course, from Goldman Sachs.
Right.
He mentioned that this is the problem with the power structure in this country. It's run by Wall Street. And then he puts Gary Cohn on there. Any problems with that selection?
No. Franklin Roosevelt, if I recall this story correctly, selected Joseph Kennedy as the first head of the SEC. Joseph Kennedy had made a fortune, and they had just put together the securities laws. And he appointed him because he said, somebody who understands the industry will understand how to regulate it best. And whatever else you think of Joseph Kennedy, he was a heck of an SEC commissioner. He really established the SEC, and I did a lot of prosecutions with him. Again, who are you going to appoint to oversee financial institutions than someone who knows about financial institutions? Right. You're going to go appoint some person who's a techie who knows all about computers but not about financial institutions. The kind of government they want to put together would be totally antithetical to a business. In a business, you put the people with skills here, here, and here. They're going to have those prior skills. The question is, what's their motivation? The best people for me on the securities prosecutions that I did, and I did a lot of them, you might remember, Boesky, Wall Street One. That's the better movie because it's about me. Wall Street One is better than But the people who did it for me were people who came out of Wall Street.
Sure, understood.
But they were prosecuting the criminals in Wall Street. The idea that everybody in Wall Street is tainted is just like everybody in the Army is tainted. It's absurd. 99% of Wall Street, straight guys, straight women. They're the best ones to straighten it out.
So I do want to ask you this before we let you go, because you do have some loyalists and supporters of yours out there that want to see you somewhere in this administration. You have said no to any cabinet position. Is there another role that you would consider maybe within the White House or an ambassadorship?
Should he have a commissioner of golf? I don't know. I've always wanted that.
A golf czar?
Golf czar? No czars in this administration.
No czars.
You know, I never liked the idea of czars. I think President Reagan came up with the drug czar. I advised against it. I was Associate Attorney General then. I put in the note, you know what happened to the last czar? They chopped his head off.
They did.
Will you stick around for us? Will you stick around
Sure,
for us?
I'd love to.
Good. We're going to keep
some of our viewers have sent in questions.
We want you to send us in your emails this morning, friends@foxnews.com. Any questions you have for the mayor, we will ask them of him when we come back.
I love it.
Channel 114, plus every story, every 15 minutes. Fox News headlines 24/7. Channel 115.
Welcome back. We still have America's mayor here. We have your questions coming up soon. One quick question, though. General Kelly just got the DHS job. Can you confirm, were you offered that job at one point?
I will not discuss the other jobs that we discussed, but I had made it clear that there was only one that I was interested in. So I think anybody that gets selected should be considered the first choice.
And you have said that you are open to maybe something else.
In the future, in the future, when I get my business exactly where I want it and everything is comfortable, and he really needs me for something. Right now, he doesn't. He's put together a great cabinet. I think this, first of all, he's put together not just the fastest cabinet ever, but I think, you know, you could stack this up with the Reagan cabinet, the Kennedy cabinet, the Roosevelt cabinet, some of the great cabinets, and it might be better.
We got some viewer emails. They flooded in this morning, so we're gonna basically not do our job, and we're just gonna let our viewers
do our job for us,
asking the question. So Richard wrote us this morning and said, "Would you ever run for mayor of New York City again?"
I doubt it. I doubt it.
You doubt it.
I doubt it.
That's not a no.
Well, I never say no. The only time I ever say no is if he asks me to commit a crime. Then I say no. Other than that, everything else is open.
All right,
well, there you go.
And that's not a crime. I'm eligible.
That is true.
The president is 2 years over, 2 terms over. Mayor is 2 terms. Then you can take off. Then you can run again. It's like a South American republic.
Leaving the door open.
Probably.
Should we have term limits in Congress?
Probably yes. Probably yes. Although there are arguments against that you lose some of the really great ones. I mean, the problem with Congress is we got some people that have been in Congress for a long time that are fabulous. Who would want to lose Orrin Hatch? Not me. I think he's one of the great members of the United States Senate, or John McCain. Some people do, but I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But then there are others who I will not mention who can hardly find their way to the seat.
that have died in office.
Tell them, put up the right hand, not the left hand.
All right, well, this one's coming in from Diana. She asks, is there anyone that has not been nominated that you would like to see in the cabinet?
Probably, but at this point it's pretty much closed. And actually there are a few that I'm arguing for right now for some of the open positions. Remember, I'm on the transition team and I've made several recommendations.
Anybody
you want to share?
No, I can't. If I did, they'd be dead. Maybe I'd be dead too.
There we go.
Do you think he has already decided on some of the big ones, like state?
No, you know, what I found with President-elect Trump is when he decides,
it's done.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
I don't think he'll hold it up maybe he'll hold it up for a day to do it at the right venue or in the right place. But once he makes up his mind, everybody around him, we know who it is.
Well, it seems like he made up his mind about Hillary Clinton and whether or not they would want to go after her. But here's a question from Ruth. If Attorney General Sessions decides to investigate Hillary, would you accept an appointment as the special prosecutor?
See, doesn't America have the best questions?
Great questions.
Yeah. That is a great question. I think several times I offered at various speeches when I probably was a little emotional. I would do it for nothing. I don't know. Let's see if we ever get there.
Did you agree with his decision not to prosecute at this point?
Yes, I agreed that it was good to put it behind us. I think it's good for him to get himself out of it. I told him, and we discussed this during the campaign, that really isn't the right decision for the president. That's for the Attorney General. The president, of course, is the boss of the Attorney General. And I was in the post-Watergate Justice Department. The way we separated that was the president gets to run policy. The Attorney General makes prosecutorial decisions. The White House should never get involved in a prosecutorial decision unless somehow it would affect national security or it would be a terrible blow to the United States. So he's got a great Attorney General. Jeff Sessions is a close friend of mine. He used to introduce me at our rallies as he used to be my boss because Jeff was the U.S. Attorney in Alabama when I was Associate Attorney General. Jeff will make the right decision.
Yeah.
Jeff will make the right decision. That should rest on the Attorney General, and I promise you, Jeff will not go meet someone on a tarmac before he makes the decision.
We've got to leave it right there, but you're going to the Army Navy game today, right?
Yes, I'm going to the Army.
Who are you pulling for?
I really can't.
He told me West Point. Go Army, beat Navy. There we go.
West Point was in my district, and I used to go up there occasionally and teach a law class. So I have a great,
love it. All right,
I have a great fondness for them. But my ex-father-in-law was in the Navy. Perfect. He was one of my heroes. So.
Michelle Malkin's coming up next.
Yep.
And Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Right? Merry Christmas. That's right. They reminded me. We're going to start saying Merry Christmas again. How about all those department stores? They have the bells, and they have the red walls, and they have the snow, but they don't have Merry Christmas. I think they're going to start putting up Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas.
I love that. The crowd probably got the biggest reaction in Michigan last night at his speech for that.
When was the last time you heard a politician say that?
I know. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Joining us now, our old friend and senior
Clayton
editor.
Clearly doesn't.
I love it.
Just kidding.
I just had people talking to my ear saying, "Get to our guest."
Oh, okay. Oh,
Stop yapping, you three. Get to our guest, who is Michelle Malkin. She's the senior editor at the Conservative Review and host of Michelle Malkin Investigates on CRTV.com. Michelle, nice to see you this morning.
Good morning.
Merry Christmas.
And early Merry Christmas and joy to the world to all of you. Yes.
Well, Hillary Clinton talking about this fake news. Obviously, you've been in the news business for a long time as a journalist, and you look through you aggregate a lot of different news over the years on your websites and so forth. What do you make of Hillary Clinton's comments on fake news? We'll play that and get your response.
Yeah.
The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year, it's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly. Bipartisan legislation is making its way through Congress to boost the government's response to foreign propaganda, and Silicon Valley is starting to grapple with the challenge and threat of fake news.
So, Michelle, legislation to combat fake news. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, that smacks of the very kind of quote-unquote fascism that all of these Trump bashers have been decrying since the election. I would file that speech under chutzpah on stilts, because the world's foremost fake news provider, Hillary Clinton, blame a YouTube video on Benghazi, having the sanctimony to lecture anybody else about false information and the consequences, bloody consequences thereof, is really occupying a bubble of unreality. But what we have here, of course, is a tactic. And it's a tactic that I have experienced for the last 25 years.
Right, you were speaking out about this, Michelle, right, since the early 90s.
Yes, that's exactly right, Abby, because as someone who has had a foot in old media and new media, it's clear that these people are threatened by alternative news sources that are taking away and diminishing their power. That certainly was a referendum of this past election. It wasn't just a referendum on establishment politics. It was a referendum on establishment media, and these people lost.
Michelle, how far would they go if they could with this fake news idea and suppressing voices they don't want to hear?
Well, look, we just had 8 years of an Obama administration where there were witch hunts against ideological enemies, and certainly even members of the press who were targeted. Ask some people who, have been independent bloggers about how they have been persecuted and even prosecuted. And this is why we're doing what we're doing at CRTV.com, where I have a new investigative show. Yeah, we're actually committing real journalism. That's why I'm here in Oklahoma covering a case of a former police officer who was witch hunted by a social justice mob, and nobody here in the local media wants to talk about it. Being an independent journalist, which, yes, that we're going to be smeared as being a purveyor of quote-unquote fake news because it's real news, you're asking questions that make people uncomfortable, and that's what Hillary Clinton and her minions want to marginalize.
Well, we like comfort. That's the reason, Michelle. And things are getting a little uncomfortable right now at the Energy Department because of a new questionnaire that is causing the liberal media to freak out. I'm going to put up some headlines about this questionnaire that's being sent around by the Trump transition team to the Energy Department workers, asking them, about climate and climate change. Trump's team demands fuel fear of Energy Department witch hunt. Trump team memo on climate change alarms Energy Department staff. If they've ever gone to climate change conferences or anything like that, they have to answer those types of questions. What do you make of this?
Oh, look at that. It's the snowflakes and buttercups up in arms because Trump won. And he has the prerogative and privilege of making sure that people work for him actually agree with his views. This gives me a lot of comfort because, of course, when Donald Trump was meeting with Al Gore, some among the common sense free market environmental movement were a little bit worried, but they're putting the pedal to the metal here, and they have every right and privilege to do this. I would remind people, I have a long memory, I wrote Culture of Corruption in 2009, that the Obama administration itself was very responsible for kicking people out, firing them, pushing out people who dared to air any dissent on the climate change issue. Ask Alan Carlin, who was a senior researcher at the EPA, who basically was muzzled because he was calling attention to the outdated data that the liberal EPA was using to justify massive regulations that would cost businesses and taxpayers huge amounts of money.
Well, yeah, I mean, in any department, that's what the bureaucracy counts on, is the long-term staff, whether they agree with who's in charge, a few appointees or not, the ability to subvert things they don't agree with. Is this type of thing common, and should it be used more widely?
Of course it is. I mean, if you can't ideologically vet your own administration, what's the point of winning? I certainly hope that they're doing this with every single agency and every nook and cranny of the Obama administration to drain that swamp.
Yeah, you wonder if this was even done in this administration. It would never be really reported on, or people wouldn't be angry about it.
No, because unfortunately, Michelle, as you know, people take the bureaucracy and the, sort of the fourth branch of government that's become our bureaucracy, in some ways has become lockstep with the Democratic Party, believing in more government. That becomes a long-term problem.
And only a few hundred people are replaced at these jobs. The thousands and thousands that actually stay there for life. And it'd be good to know.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You've got these entrenched civil servants who are the ones in charge of policy instead of the president himself. And now things are going to change, and they are not happy about it.
And you are smiling.
Michelle, good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Merry Christmas.
Take care.
Merry Christmas.
CLR is available at these fine retailers.
Well, are parts of the world really afraid of our next president? Here are some of the recent headlines from different media outlets that pushes the narrative that people are terrified of what Trump's America means. Just take a look at those all over the place. But our next guest thinks that might be and is a good thing. Joining us with his take is Dr. Sebastian Gorka, a professor of strategy and irregular warfare at the Institute of World Politics and the author of the great book, Defeating Jihad. Doctor, thanks for joining us this morning. So you think of a fear in the eyes of those around the world for America is a good thing?
Let me quote Mad Dog Mattis, who made the 1st Marine Corps Division's motto kind of his personal label. We will be no better friend to our friends and no worse enemy to our enemies. In the last 8 years, the world has gone ablaze wherever you look, whether it's Asia with China building these fake islands, whether it's Russia invading its neighbors, whether it's the rise of ISIS. The fact is the world is ablaze thanks to a lack of American leadership. January 20th, new sheriff in town, Peter.
But if you listen to global elites or internationalists or foreign policy intelligentsia, they'll say, but Russia, but Taiwan, but NATO, he doesn't know what he's doing. What's going to happen to the world? What do you say to them?
This is the same liberal elite that still doesn't understand what happened a month ago. They have no idea. They're cocooned in this little bubble, and they just generate these false narratives. I can tell you, as somebody who lives in that national security world and talks to these people from other countries, there is such a relief, because our allies and our partners understand that after 8 years of being dissed, of 8 years of their interests being undermined by the lead from behind Obama mantra, now our friends will be helped. And the enemies are the only people who will be afraid. And Peter, that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, it is a good thing.
Right?
The other thing they've derided a little bit is the America First mantra. Well, does that mean you're abandoning the world? Does that mean you're... I mean, what do you say to those critics?
So who else should be first? Should it be North Korea? Should it be Iran?
Global citizenship.
Oh, yeah. What's on your passport, Peter? Is it an American eagle, or is it the flag of the Republic of Iran?
Yeah, the eagle.
The eagle. Yeah. So are you an American?
Yes, sir.
Do we have interests?
Indeed.
Should we protect them?
I think so.
That's Mr. Trump.
No, but the world reacts to that and says, you know, will he be belligerent? He's going to fight ISIS. How will he do so? What kind of that uncertainty? How does he use that to his advantage?
In every war, you have to exploit uncertainty. We don't telegraph what we do in advance. Bill Clinton did this in the Balkans. Do you remember? Where he said no boots on the ground. What did Milosevic do? Exploited that mercilessly. This administration did exactly the same thing. We're not going to do X, we're not going to do Y. Well, then your enemy just reassesses what they have to do and exploits that telegraphing. Yeah. So we're not going to do that. And, you know, the fact is we have an individual who said repeatedly, let's cool our jets a little bit. Mr. Trump has said, and Mr. Flynn, General Flynn, we're not going to make enemies needlessly, okay? No new enemies. That's not logical. But where our interests are being damaged, we're going to step up to the plate.
Interesting. So he will be stepping up to the plate in 40 days. Brief answer, what's the biggest surprise people I think are going to find from the new president?
Just how diplomatic he will be with the people he needs to be diplomatic with.
All right. You are a diplomatic man yourself, Doctor.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. All right.
Good morning to you. It is Saturday, December 10th. I'm Abby Huntsman, and scratch one off the list for Secretary of State. Rudy Giuliani says he is out. You will hear from America's mayor about why he dropped out, and Geraldo Rivera will react in just moments.
Plus, Hillary Clinton sounded the alarm about fake news.
The epidemic of malicious fake news and false propaganda that flooded social media over the past year. It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences.
I don't know, based on the track record of the Clintons, a few people might call her a hypocrite for saying some of that. But if that's the case, what would you call Lion Brian Williams?
And this could be the most important story of the day. Santa's got a new crew to help deliver the presents on Christmas morning.
Look at those guys.
Those are little penguins. Little penguin helpers. They can't hold much, though, on their flappers. They call them a flapper? Flipper.
You're right.
Flipper. Plural.
Flipper, flapper?
Flapper. Who's going to tell the elves? Fox and Friends Hour for a dog to make it,
It's true.
I'm sure they add an extra price tag on that.
Brilliant. Love that. All right.
True.
Well, we're going to talk about the cabinet and where things are shaping up right now for Donald Trump's transition team. And all eyes have been on the Secretary of State position. Well, we learned overnight, and then Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor, on our set just a short time ago, explaining his decision for why he dropped out or took his name out of the running for Secretary of State. Listen.
He had good choices. My objective in joining the campaign was never to get a job. It was the last thing in my mind. It was for my country. I didn't want to see this country slip into socialism. I didn't want to see us become some kind of European second-rate country. I thought that's where we were headed, and I thought only Donald Trump could stop us. Also, I knew him for 28 years. He's a close personal friend. And I knew what America is now finding out, what a great president he could become.
Yeah.
So I did it with a great deal of passion. And the idea of Secretary of State sort of entered my mind toward the end. And when I thought about it and I saw the choices that he had and the difficult position he was in because of his loyalty to me and friendship, I said the best thing for me is take myself out of it. And there was no other job.
Was that a difficult thing to do?
A little bit, but not that difficult, because I knew he had good choices. If I thought he didn't have a great choice, and God, he needed only me, which is probably never true, that they ever need only you. But if I thought that, I would do it in a minute.
There you go.
He did say if there was like a golf position in the administration, he would take golf.
Well, let's bring in that voice to you here. There's the great Geraldo Rivera joining us this morning.
Does a golden doodle have web feet?
That's what
That's the key.
That would
if
be
it
the
doesn't
next
have web feet, because I mated a lab and a pug. And the dog I got was grotesque and lovable, but it did not have web feet. I lived on the river.
Did you call it a lug?
Why not? Why not?
All right, we're going to ask you about, I would love to talk about dogs all morning, but I want to talk about the cabinet picks. You heard Mayor Rudy Giuliani there talking about his reasoning for taking his name out of the running. What do you think the story is here?
Well, I don't know. I like Mayor Giuliani very much. I've known him for years. I've known him since he was a prosecutor in the Southern District. I think, in my opinion, and I don't pretend to any inside information, I think the mayor got too hyper-partisan in terms of his demeanor change from being America's mayor, appealing broadly, to being, if you remember the Republican National Convention and some of the appearances in the campaign, he was so fervent and he was so emotional and big-eyed and different than he had been in public life. And I just didn't have the, and again, I love the guy, but the gravitas, it seemed to me, the dignity that Mitt Romney does have. But I think that Mitt Romney's problem is the same as Mayor Giuliani. He was so fervent in his opposition to Donald Trump that I think both of them kind of excluded themselves because
Rudy
of that
was such a loyalist, and along with folks like Gingrich. But you think that, what some suggested, why are the loyalists not there in the cabinet? Do you think that hurt him at the end, is what you're saying?
I do. I really do. I think that because, and I think that it's tarnished General Flynn also. And I think that if he were to be facing a Senate confirmation as National Security Advisor, he'd have a very, very rough time of it. I just think that Trump is transitioning into this statesman. Now he still has the verve, he still has the irreverence, he still has the Twitter account. He's going to be a very different stylistically. But I think that what he's trying to do is surround himself with people who have been in government, who have international reputations, who are not controversial, you know, the Oklahoma AG aside, who are, and I guess the Labor Secretary designate also. But it just seems to me that this is a cabinet that appeals to real traditional conservative Republicans in a way that it would reflect a Reagan cabinet or a Nixon cabinet. I think that it's a very traditional conservative cabinet.
Because it's interesting. I mean, we know how much he does value loyalty, but you look at some of them who have been the most loyal to him, whether it's Newt Gingrich, Mike Huckabee, or Mayor Giuliani, and he's making it clear that just because you are loyal to me doesn't mean you're automatically going to give him the exact job that you want. I'm looking for the best person for that role. And I think for some people, they see that as refreshing.
Trump and I've known the president-elect for a long time. He does value loyalty, and he extends friendship and warmth in a way that is very, very personal, and you appreciate it. I got a note last night. I was, you know, I wrote back immediately and said,
from Mr. Trump,
how excited Erica, my wife, and Saul, our 11-year-old, was to hear from you, Mr. President-elect. But that's different. Who he invites to his parties or the inauguration or he likes to hang out with or he has a warm feeling for, I think is different. He's a businessman. And I think he's going to run this administration. He's going to be CEO of America. You know, the whole thing about Celebrity Apprentice is so interesting. You know, having been on the final cast of Celebrity Apprentice and wrap taping in March of 2015, he had not yet decided. Obviously, he had decided but hadn't announced it. He's going to handle the presidency as Celebrity Apprentice times 1,000, times a million. He ran it in a business-like way. He was flamboyant on the air, or he had that persona on the air that was very well known to people over the seasons. But he also controlled the program in a way that was very business aware. He was intimately familiar with the ratings performance, with the revenue from the show. He knew everything about that show, and you know, he's going to run the country. And people will mock the comparison, but remember what I said. That style will be how he runs. It's a microcosm. Exactly.
I want to ask you about something else that Rudy Giuliani said, because he hasn't done a lot of interviews on this question, and specifically around Hillary Clinton. And it seems that President-elect Trump has turned the page on Hillary Clinton, saying, you know, he mentioned on 60 Minutes, not in the mood to go after a prosecutor that wants to move past that. Kellyanne Conway has said the same thing. So we asked the mayor, if called upon to be a special prosecutor, if Attorney General Sessions asked him to do this, would he do it? Here was his response.
I think several times I offered at various speeches when I probably was a little emotional. I would do it for nothing. I don't know. Let's see if we ever get there.
Did you agree with his decision not to prosecute at this point?
Yes, I agreed that it was good to put it behind us. I think it's good for him to get himself out of it. I told him, and we discussed this during the campaign, that really isn't the right decision for the president. That's for the Attorney General.
So have we turned the page on this?
I certainly hope so, Clayton, and I am delighted that the president-elect has made that decision. Why are we going to go back over that sorry ground again?
Well, because there's a lot of sorry ground.
But, you know, I'm not so sure of that, Pete. As you know, I have been extremely skeptical about, I think that, remembering back to what the majority leader and the House Republicans, McCarthy, said about, you know, the best thing about these hearings is it's diminishing Hillary Clinton's poll numbers. I think it was really tainted by politics. I mean, there's bigger fish for the Justice Department to fry. I'm much more concerned about, you know, these allegations of were Russians really messing with our elections. I want to explore that. I think that there is real substance there to unravel.
And Rudy Giuliani agrees with you on that, too.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have people messing with the election. Just because we like the way this one turned out, that doesn't mean that we forgive a foreign power for meddling with our elections. I think that's very serious. What if it had gone the other way?
No, you're
what if
very
we didn't like the way it turned out?
But would you reject the idea that some are trying to delegitimize Trump's election as a result?
Well,
I mean, you can investigate without doing that,
with
right?
the whole the electoral college, the majority vote, and all the rest of it, I think that people will effort the delegitimization of the Trump election, but it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Trump is the president elect. He will be the 45th president of the United States. It's not a question of the Trump train anymore that we're jumping on. It's America's train. We root for his success.
Yep.
And if you are obstructing that or trying to undermine the president, I think shame on you. But still, that doesn't alter the fact that if the Russians mess with our elections, we should know about it. I mean, the next time they'll lower the boom on the Republicans if they don't like the Republican candidate.
Geraldo, thanks for being here this morning.
Great
sharp suit.
Well, you know, the temperature dropped below 30, so I take the wool suits out. I like it.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, Geraldo. All right, we do have some other headlines to get to this morning.
I think Mitt Romney, I mean, I voted for him. I supported him. I thought he'd been a much better president than Barack Obama. But I do think, like Mike Huckabee does, he should apologize. Or at least he should explain what he meant by some of the comments which hurt me greatly when I was campaigning for my friend Donald Trump.
Rudy Giuliani on the show earlier, weighing in on Mitt Romney as a possible choice for Secretary of State after his decision to drop out as a contender.
Yep, joining us now to react is RNC Communications Director Sean Spicer. Sean, good to see you this morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. So let's start with that because everyone is curious about who the pick is going to be for Secretary of State. I mean, you heard Mayor Giuliani there saying he still has got some concerns about Mitt Romney, as do many others that have voiced their opinion, saying, you know, he got really personal during the campaign about President-elect Trump. Where do you think his head is at, and who do you ultimately think he will decide for this job?
Well, I think ultimately that decision's, like all the other ones, going to be up to President-elect Trump's. He has brought in, and you all have seen through the magic of television, some of these amazing individuals who've been successful in business and government and the military to come in and sit down with him, in some cases multiple times, to talk about where they think they have strengths that could possibly be used to fulfill his vision and his agenda in terms of restoring America's place abroad. So, look, I think the answer is ultimately when Donald Trump finally feels as though somebody clicks with him, he's going to make that announcement. He'll let the team know. But until then, he's going to continue to talk to these individuals until he feels a level of comfort that the right person has been selected.
Is the CEO of Exxon, Rex Tillerson, is he number one choice right now? If you were a betting man?
I honestly don't know. I don't know where the horse race is. He's definitely a highly qualified individual and someone who made a huge impression on Mr. Trump. So, but where that horse race is, only President-elect Trump knows. I mean, these people are coming in. It's his decision. He keeps his counsel very close. But he is definitely someone that would be on any short list and high up there because of the immense qualifications that he brings to the table.
All right, we want to get your take on Russia, the CIA, and a tweet that you put out there a few hours ago. You say the RNC, just to clarify, was not hacked. The New York Times was told and chose to ignore exhibit number 1 in fake news.
Yeah, actually, the second one was wait for their next exclusive this morning that Elvis is riding a unicorn over a rainbow. I mean, they were told that this was but they were told very, high up within the New York Times that this was not true, that intelligence agencies that we are working with confirmed that we have not been hacked. And yet they chose to ignore that because they wanted to write a story that fit a different narrative. The fact of the matter is that they are using unknown, unnamed sources to support a narrative that they want to put out there. But the fact is, where are the named sources? Where are the agencies? How come the CIA won't go on the record? It's amazing how they want to talk about fake news and bash the right. But you look at the so-called great institution, the New York Times, they were told very privately that they were and we were willing to give them access to certain things to prove it. And yet they chose to ignore it. This is reprehensible. The New York Times should be ashamed. And the American people need to know that when you read something in the New York Times, there is zero credibility. It's shameful what they did.
So 100% the RNC was not hacked.
No, that's correct. That's correct. And we've made that assertion several times. We work with law enforcement and the intelligence agencies on a very regular basis to ensure that our systems are continue to be secure. And we have upgraded all of our systems throughout the course of this cycle. So, and all of that information was provided to the New York Times. And yet, like I said in that tweet, they chose to ignore it because it didn't fit the narrative that they wanted to spell. And they continue to be on this because they don't want to support Donald Trump.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Sean Spicer with us this morning. Good to see you, sir.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
Well, many people would call Hillary Clinton a hypocrite for condemning fake news. But if that's the case, what would you call Brian Williams. Well, this morning, he's on a new mission to promote the truth.
And could one of them stalling out? Here to weigh in, TV host Mike Rowe. Mike, good to see you this morning.
Hey, Mike, welcome back.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We see the poll numbers here. What is going on?
Well, you were just talking about fake news, and I would never suggest this is a fake poll, but I would suggest that I have no idea what to make of it. I don't know where the relevance is, and I'm not sure what the authors of it would really have us conclude. I think, as I understood the data, and I'm certainly not a statistician, but we're going back to the Depression, and we're looking at the rate with which kids have out-earned their parents over the last 70 and 80 and 90 years, and obviously there's a drop-off. When we started keeping track of this kind of thing, the country was depressed, and then it was recessed, and then we had the post-war boom, and then, you know, it's just mathematically, I don't understand how it's reasonable to assume that every generation is going to out-earn the last one. But my bigger problem with it, you know, I run a foundation. It's modest, but it's hyper-focused on the individual. So we don't look at, you know, dozens of millions of people and how much they're earning this month versus that month. We try and focus on work ethic. We focus on jobs that actually exist. We focus on training. And from what I've seen, the dream is not dead. The dream is alive and well. But again, look, the premise is it's a dream. We're not, I mean, the degree to which we hope for a thing to happen. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you conclude?
We do a lot of stories on this show about higher education, our universities and colleges, and the safe spaces and trigger warnings and bubble worlds. Are we preparing kids to go out and achieve the American dream like their parents did?
Well, you know, I think the obvious answer is no, but the clever answer is yes, if you really look at a dream for what it actually is, a fantasy, a hope. You know, a dream job is this thing that we've told millions and millions of kids is not only out there for them, but is the proximate cause of their happiness. So if you don't get your dream job, you're always going to feel vaguely dissettled and unhappy. It's kind of like not finding your soul mate. Right? I mean, it's a snipe hunt. It's hard to go out in the world with that level of expectation. So, you know, again, it's so much more interesting to me to look at an individual and say, are you willing to do the hard thing? That's what Dirty Jobs was. That's what Somebody's Got to Do It was. And that is still for sale.
Are they willing to do that? Is this younger generation willing to get their hands dirty, to, you know, mow those 60 lawns a day for the landscaping job, to go out there and do the dirty jobs in order to move this economy?
Honestly, with great respect, that's a trick question for me, because if I say yes, I just pass judgment on 40 million people. If I say no, I'm a pessimist, and I'm not a pessimist. I honestly believe that the opportunities are better than they ever have been for the precise reason that the reverse commute is more lucrative than it's ever been, because more people are looking around and concluding, erroneously in my humble opinion, that opportunity is dead. If you really want to distill this down into its most simple two component parts, in my view, the country right now is divided, but not in the ways we typically discuss. It's divided over here by people who are absolutely convinced the hope is dead, opportunity is dead, and the dream is dead. And over here, people have a different view. We're being divided through optimism and pessimism. And if we don't look a little harder at the numbers that come over the transom, my fear is we're going to conclude something completely upside down.
Right. We also live in this world where, you know, you can follow people's Instagram accounts and it seems like everyone else's life is perfect, right? Or you can launch a YouTube channel and they become famous within 24 hours. Everyone's wanting to be famous today, and you lose sight of service and humility and hard work. And that's a concern that I have for this next generation coming up, and instilling that in people. And that is still the American dream, and it should be.
Well, think about reality as it applies both to the American dream and to that particular vertical of TV with which we've become obsessed. My favorite moment in reality television, aside from the ones I participated in, are those early episodes of American Idol, where you see a 20 or a 22-year-old or an 18-year-old auditioning and learning, somewhat tragically, but for the first time in their life, that they can't sing.
Right, that they're not good.
For the first time in their life. Nobody ever told them, no, look, hey, maybe your dreams and your particular set of skills would be better served over here. And so that's the disconnect. You know, we have 5.8 million jobs available right now. nobody's standing in line to audition for them.
Right, that's a great point. Yeah. And we need them.
Do you think a study like this, a reflection that kids aren't making what their parents did at that age, is part of what Trump is tapping into, this sense that we're falling behind, that we had greater days, that they can be great again going forward?
I think politicians have to say things that confirm the kinds of studies you're talking about and acknowledge the sort of big, fat global trends that do, in fact, exist. But I believe that fundamentally, opportunity lives in the cracks. And in many, many ways, the more dire it looks for the masses, the more interesting it becomes for the entrepreneur, for the aspiring small business person, but most importantly, for the individual who's willing to learn a skill that's actually in demand. We've trained 500 welders. They're killing it right now. Yeah. They're killing it. Steam fitters, pipe fitters, I can go down the list.
And those in a down economy, that's what we talk about here on the show, those in a down economy are, keep that same paycheck. They're in demand. You're always going to need carpenters. You're always going to need those welders, those skill sets. But what do you think about automation? This idea that we're going to bring these jobs back to the United States, I think is pretty much a fallacy because those jobs are gone to begin with. Now we have robots doing a lot of those jobs.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, look, it's glib to say somebody's going to have to make the robots. It's true. I'll defer to Huxley. Huxley said the greatest threat to freedom is total anarchy. The second greatest threat is total efficiency. I think we've confused efficiency with effectiveness in some really fundamental ways. One of the tenets of dirty jobs was to find people who had dedicated their work ethos to becoming effective. And as a result, there was not this obsession with always wringing every last dollar or penny of efficiency out of the model. It was just it seemed a simpler thing. But of course, I know how naive that sounds. Efficiency does push the greater market. And my very first job that anybody ever paid me for was tearing tickets at United Artists TV at one of those multiplexes in a mall. I went back today. The usher is gone. Wow. The tickets you buy automatically, and behind the concession stand, you get your popcorn from a machine too. So, we probably don't want to get into the minimum wage, but when you talk about the unintended consequences of moving all that up, you're knocking the lower rungs off the ladder, and that ain't good.
It's a changing times. It really is. Mike, thanks for being with us this morning. Good to get your take on things.
Anytime.
One smart cookie.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, coming up, now that Rudy Giuliani is out of the running for Secretary of State, who is the new front runner? Karl Rove here to weigh in on that ahead.
Plus, we're just hours away from the Secretary of State list getting a little shorter as America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani drops out of the race. Joining us now is former senior advisor to President George W. Bush and Fox News contributor Karl Rove. Merry Christmas, Karl. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Merry Christmas.
Indeed.
Merry Christmas.
Well, we had the mayor on earlier in the show, confirmed that indeed he did take his name out of the running, actually back in late November. What do you make of that, and how does that reshuffle the consideration for Secretary of State?
Well, look, it probably doesn't reshuffle it because he did make it in late November, and so Donald Trump has known this for a while. But look, this happens all the time in transitions. It happened to us several times in the transition that somebody was under consideration withdrew their name in 2000, 2001. But we know about it now because this transition has been so public. Donald Trump has decided to, interview people publicly, summon them to Trump Tower, and I think it's helped him because it's given people a sense of who he is, that he's a magnanimous individual, putting things behind him, looking for the best person, giving it serious consideration. But I think this doesn't really change the reality of it much. He's got a tough decision to make. He's taken his time, and he's going to come up with whom he thinks is going to be the best partner to him as Secretary of State.
Who do you think's at the top of that list? The name we've been talking about this morning, CEO of Exxon, Rex Tillerson. Do you think that that's the most likely outcome here?
Well, it's the latest one, and he's a terrific person. He's a personal friend of mine. I know him well. I had lunch with him last week. He is a great individual, and we've got others. We've heard Alan Mulally. We've had Mitt Romney. We've had Jim Stavridis, the admiral. We've got David Petraeus. Look, here's the deal. This is a very personal decision. We can talk all we want about this, but there's one person who's going through an enormous set of very elaborate calculations as to who he wants, and that's Donald J. Trump. Only he knows what the ratings are right now.
All right, quickly, we only have 30 seconds to go here, Karl, but I want to get your thoughts on a new Bloomberg poll out showing that President-elect Trump's popularity now at 50%, the highest it's ever been nationally.
Yeah, look, Fox News exit poll on election night, 38 favorable, 61 unfavorable. I like looking at averages of polls. If you take the 6 most recent December, only in December, it's now 45, 55. That's a change in 1 month, up +7, down on the -11. I suspect that we'll start shortly having more polls here that have Donald Trump above 50% and his favorables higher than his unfavorables by the time he gets sworn in.
Right. The whiteboard is back.
Love
Thank you, Carl.
Hey, incidentally, Abby, you asked for advice on how to, as the only adult on the set, to take care of those boys. Ruler on Morris, tell Haig says to drop and give you 20. He'll do it.
I love it.